It's been a conversation over the last several weeks that several storied filmmakers really have a beef with superhero films, specifically Marvel films. It's been an interesting and aggravating story to see play out. Despite that, I do want to throw my 2 cents out there. I don't think there's a huge amount of stuff to say on this topic, so I'm guessing this will be a bit of a quicker one. Anyway, let's dive in. This whole shitstorm started when Martin Scorsese said in an interview with Empire magazine that Marvel films are not cinema by saying, "I don't see them. I tried, but that's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with the actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being." Pretty damning thing to say, and we'll get back to the details of that statement in a minute, but then, following this statement, Francis Ford Coppola then added fuel to the fire after being asked if he agreed with Scorsese, saying, "Real cinema brings something, a wonderful gift to society. It doesn't just take money and make people rich. That's despicable." So Martin was kind when he said it's not cinema. He didn't say it's despicable, which I just said it is. More recently, John Woo has added that he fears Marvel films will cause younger audiences to get lost or lose appreciation for what cinema is. Now, I'm sure there's more that's been said, but the above and the clarification provided later on by Scorsese I think is plenty to unpack. Up front, I'd like to address part of Scorsese's original statement, that he doesn't see these movies. Now, nothing inherently wrong with not seeing films from a specific franchise or genre. Not everything is for everyone. This does make me take everything he says about these films themselves, though, as utterly meaningless, as he's just revealed himself as uninformed. Now, before you jump on me here, Martin Scorsese is a masterful filmmaker who is incredibly knowledgeable about film and filmmaking. He may even have a large amount of insight into how franchises like the MCU could negatively shape the larger film landscape. Fair points, but based on the fact that he has not watched the movies, he is, by his own admission, a complete ignoramus on the workings of Marvel's films. How can you say a movie doesn't convey emotional and psychological experiences to other human beings if you have not exposed yourself to those stories? Kind of reminds me of when politicians make claims that video games are ruining society or making new generations of kids shitty. Like, excuse me, what the hell do you know? There'll be some more comparison to video game stuff in just a minute, too. Moving on, though. Scorsese's thought of these Marvel films as just theme parks is simply reductive and demonstrates a lack of understanding and exposure to the actual films. Yeah, there are a lot of action scenes in each of them, but there are also plenty of moments throughout this franchise where the story slows down and focuses on the characters. Hell, one of the most celebrated sequences is just the Avengers hanging out in Hawkeye's farmhouse licking their wounds. Another, from that same film, is the after party scene where everyone is just shooting the shit and playing around trying to lift Thor's hammer. This moment also ends up serving as a payoff for a film that would come out 4 years later. A setup and payoff, by the way, told entirely visually and cinematically. Both of these scenes were also from a movie that many people consider to be one of the weaker outings in the MCU, but these characters are so rich and vibrant that these moments stand out. Martin Scorsese is no doubt unaware of these moments because he hasn't seen the film, or essentially any of the others in the series. I'm not really sure what he means by "I tried," but he could very well have only seen Ang Lee's Hulk and Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer years ago and called it a day. To boil it down, Scorsese's comment is sort of the equivalent of someone reading 5 pages of a book and then throwing it in the trash while saying it's not literature. His statements just aren't accurate. On to Coppola for a minute. In essence, he seems to be arguing that franchise films such as the MCU exist only to make people rich and that they don't contribute to society in any way. Okay, sure, on one note, these films probably mostly continue to be made because they are immensely profitable to Disney. On the other hand, why is it that they're so profitable? Maybe it's because this stuff is really meaningful to a lot of people? What about these hospitalized kids getting visits from their favorite superheroes? Is that not meaningful enough for you? Robert Downey Jr. recently announced plans for an organization that hopes to use AI to fight climate change. That seems like a pretty big gift to society. Where do you think he got the money to do that? Beyond all of that, as an artist, to call another artist's work despicable is a pretty low blow, especially when that work is made with care and is clearly important and empowering to a lot of people. Now to Martin Scorsese's follow-up comments in his opinion piece in the New York Times. This piece is well worth a read. If you haven't taken a look at it already, I'll try to link it in the description below. His words here are far kinder, for one, and he recognizes the talent on display in the films discussed. But he does kind of fall off the rails for me a little bit as he keeps going. When discussing how Hitchcock films were essentially the franchise of his youth, one point that stuck out to me is that he mentions, while the films of Hitchcock like North by Northwest and Strangers on a Train did have stunning set pieces, they're still revered because of the internal and external dynamics of the characters. While reading that, I couldn't help but think the same about many Marvel movies. Yeah, sure, the airport battle in Civil War is good superhero fun, for sure, but it has weight because of the characters in the scene and how they're fighting friend against friend. Even this is dwarfed by the smaller scale final fight between Bucky, Steve, and Tony, because the character dynamics at play in the sequence. Tony realizes that Bucky's killed his parents, and also that Cap knew about it and kept it from him. Steve is torn between loyalty to his two friends and the realization that he hadn't really done the right thing by keeping the truth to himself. Bucky is burdened with the guilt of killing innocent people, even though he didn't have any control at the time, and all of this is engineered by a man who lost his family as collateral damage in an Avengers victory from years earlier. The scene is a solid fight, for sure, with memorable shots and cuts, but, like Hitchcock's films before, would be nothing without the emotions of the story and the characters. Then take the final battle of Endgame. The battle itself is just fine, but there are great moments within it. The most celebrated moments of this sequence are the character beats. Cap lifting Thor's hammer, the portal scene, Tony hugging Peter in his first full show of affection for the kid, Tony's sacrifice. The reason these are revered already is because of the strength of the characters and the unique way this series has been constructed. Both Scorsese and Coppola called out superhero films for not taking risks as one of the main reasons they're not cinema. Put it frankly, I call bullshit. Is there a basic formula that can be identified as a consistent structure across many of these movies? Yeah, for sure, but that doesn't make this endeavor a safe one. Just the structure of this massive interconnected universe itself is a huge risk. Don't believe me? Just look around the film industry at all the other failed attempts. Marvel Studios is the only one to try and succeed at making this work. It takes a deft and patient hand with knowledge and love for the material to make something like this successful. Even casting Robert Downey Jr. was a risk at the time. Plus, all of this had to be built without access to Marvel Comics' most popular characters, as I understand it. It's easy to look back now and see this thing as a complete domineering juggernaut, but it wasn't always that way. Now that the franchise is where it is, they are able to take more risks internally as well. Guardians of the Galaxy was met with a lot of skepticism due to its absurd and wacky premise. WandaVision is apparently a genre horror Dick Van Dyke show hybrid. I mean, come on, no risks? Really? Lastly, I want to touch on John Woo's comment about these films causing a loss of appreciation for real cinema. All three of the aforementioned directors make claims along these lines, and I just can't get behind it. I mean, what does real cinema even mean? This kind of talk reminds me of certain parts of the video game community saying that others aren't real gamers because they play more casual games or mobile games. It's just elitist gatekeeping bullshit. I sympathize that the prevalence of superhero films probably makes it harder to find funding for and release films other than that. I'm sure that's immensely frustrating. I also sympathize that aspects of mobile gaming like loot boxes and microtransactions leaking into mainstream $60 games sucks and is super frustrating. That doesn't make the attitudes towards fans of both of those types of entertainment any better. These filmmakers should be respected for their work and their development of the craft, but they should also be held to a standard higher than anonymous internet users angry about casuals ruining their games. Superheroes dominate the film landscape right now, but this isn't a new phenomenon. The Western reigned supreme in Hollywood for decades, and then it didn't. These things come and go in waves. Plus, there are plenty of avenues to release films that aren't superhero movies. Streaming services are clamoring for quality original content to set themselves apart, but Scorsese already knows that. Dude, you got to make The Irishman and release it in theaters. It's a 3.5-hour movie. For the moment, the Academy requires a theatrical release for Oscar eligibility. So these services will release movies made by acclaimed filmmakers in theaters for limited releases. This isn't nearly as dire a situation as these filmmakers seem to make it out to be. This too shall pass. I made a video a long time ago about the many perceived deaths of cinema, which I'll link at the end. This is probably just another aspect of that. Superheroes won't destroy cinema. I think Bob Iger spoke very well and insightfully on the subject when asked. These won't degrade the art form. However, I think it's important to keep in mind many of the filmmakers making MCU films may one day be considered comparably to a Scorsese, Wu, or Coppola. They make films both within and outside of the superhero genre. If you haven't seen Taika Waititi's Jojo Rabbit, you must. It's incredible. These individuals are among the next generation of filmmakers who will carry the torch of the art form forward and inspire others. Superheroes won't contribute to the degradation of the art of film, but referring to the creations of the current up-and-coming filmmakers as despicable just might. Well, that's really all I had to say. There's no hate from me for any of these filmmakers discussed. They're all incredibly talented people who care a lot about this art form. I just think they're really off base, and that their words perhaps have some unintended meaning and consequences. Let me know what you think below, though. If you like this video, maybe drop a like on it. That'd be super helpful. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Let's go.